My sister has been gone for over 25 years now, and it's only now that I think it's finally time to tell her story. It was in the middle of summer. My sister, Ella, and I had barely lived on the farm for 6 months. Our father was off in the military, having been gone for about 2 years by this time, and we missed him dearly. The farm sat in the middle of nowhere, with miles and miles between us and the rest of civilization. Our mother worked very hard to raise us two, but her work only increased due to the fact that she also tended the farm. We tried our best to help our mother with the daily chores: feeding chickens, collecting eggs, giving the animals hay, and slopping the pigs. We felt we did hard work, though our portion of the work was less than 10% of what was needed to be done daily. Most of our time was spent doing what any other 6 and 8-year-old might do: playing in the yard. Our house was an old white, painted 2-story building, plus a basement. The paint chipped off the exterior walls and the shutters were missing, but it was cozy and nice, even having a large tire swing on the tree in the front. Surrounding the house and barn were what felt like miles of cornfield. Ella and I ran through the corn, playing various games of hide and seek and such. It just so happened that one day we ran further through the corn than we ever had before. The field broke away to a large, empty, desolate, barren land. Now I say empty, but of course there was tall, unattended grass and a singular tree. The tree in itself was a somewhat disturbing sight. The bark black and flaking, branches barren and gnarled. The trunk stood tall and thick. A grown adult could have stood on the other side, and we wouldn't have known. The trunk twisted and bent in a sort of unnatural way. Just looking at the tree made me uneasy. It didn't help that the world around us was dead silent. No birds, no bugs, and the wind just held its breath. The tree expelled a kind of aura, the kind that held with it the stench of rotting wood and animal carcass that filled our nostrils. Gripping my sister's hand, I tried to pull her back, begged her to turn back. She smiled at me and told me it was okay, then convinced me that we needed to take a rest. So, against my better judgment, we sat at the roots of the beast. God, if only I knew then what I know now, I would have picked her up and carried her home, kicking and screaming. It felt like we talked for hours. We talked about everything. We talked about how much we missed Daddy, how we were excited for the pumpkin harvest, how we carved some for Halloween, and what we'd dress as for trick-or-treat, which we have done in our town, believe it or not. Eventually, Ella brought up her sadness at the lack of toys we owned due to the fact that we hadn't quite made enough off the farm to buy new ones. She told me if she could, she'd wish for new toys and other luxury things. Suddenly, with an abruptness that made us both jump to our feet, we heard a loud thump from behind the tree. Slowly and cautiously, with a scared glance to one another, we took hold of one another's hands and went to look. There, at the base of the tree, 2 brand new rag dolls with beautiful brown yarn hair and sweet painted faces. Each doll wore a different dress, one in yellow, the other sky blue. Between the dolls sat a multicolored top, a toy boat with a cherry-colored finish and white sail, and a set of jacks with a shiny red ball. Dumbfounded, we looked around, trying to find anyone, but we were alone. Ella gathered the toys, and despite my protests, we went home. Day after day, Ella went back to that tree, but I refused to go near it. It terrified me. Each day, she brought back more and more things. Sweets, toys, books, costume jewelry, and clothing in her exact size. Mom never seemed to notice, but then again, how could she when she was always so busy with the farm? One day, Ella and her got into a huge fight, and Ella ran. I knew where she was headed. I followed after her quietly, stealthily through the corn. The only light to guide me was the harvest moon casting a pumpkin glow. I was right. She stood in front of the tree, still sniffling from her fit, but speaking to someone I couldn't see. A soft, airy woman's voice returned the conversation, but I couldn't hear her over the sound of my heart pounding, terrified. Ella begged the woman I couldn't see to take her away. That was when I found my courage to step forward and drag her away. I moved from my hiding spot to grab my sister's hand when the sound of splintering wood broke the silence. The massive, gnarled trunk split open, and what emerged from its depths, I will never forget. Frozen, I stuck to the spot in sheer terror. I stared at it, or rather, her, as she emerged. The head rocked side to side to allow the horns of a bovine skull that served as her head through the trunk's gap. Tangled, thin hair fell around the eye sockets and draped over bony shoulders and horns. The hands that pulled her from her resting place were more claw than hand. Her feet clawed as well. She wore no cloth, but that only served to increase the grotesqueness of the woman. Loose skin hung off a skeletal frame, lower stomach pudgy. Her breasts sagged with age, and having once been full, her skin the color of milk gone sour, dirtied with earth and rotten in places, still coated in dry blood. She gave the image of an old woman who has lost all her weight, but not skin, only keeping enough to gather at her lower stomach. Despite my terror, Ella seemed unfazed by this woman, no, creature, now reaching out for her. I jerked her back, but the thing grabbed her other hand. It was a tug of war that seemed to last ages, but with all my fear, my hands were slick with sweat, and Ella's hand came loose. I fell to the ground, and when I looked up, my poor sister was gone. The creature, however, was not. It hovered over me, reaching out to take me too. I scrambled up and ran. It let out a terrible shriek, a mixture of a scream of rage and an angered lowing. It hunched down to all fours, giving chase through the corn after me. Crying, my vision was blurred, but I fought my way through. I burst through the line of corn and ran for the house. Glancing back, I could see it growling at me from the line. My mother didn't believe my story. I mean, who would? The police were called, and a search went on, and on, and on. But she was never found. My mom refused to move, even after my sister's funeral, as they'd given up hope that she was still alive. So, I grew up in that house, but I never played in that corn again. I knew it was still out there, watching, waiting. At the age of 19, I went back to that tree, a chainsaw in hand. I would make sure that no one would ever go through what I did. But God, I was a fool. It took me a good hour to cut it down, and over the next few weeks, we burned that damn thing to the ground. I wish I could tell you that that was the end of it. But I sit here now, in my childhood home, typing by a low light of the computer screen and the light of a full harvest moon. Outside, peering at me from around the tree in the front yard, the one with the tire swing. It waits. It seems by destroying and burning the tree, I merely released it to move closer. I've not left my house in 14 years.